The rain fell in Seattle the way it always did in December. Soft, relentless, turning the city into a watercolor painting where the edges of everything blurred. Clara Bennett stood beneath the awning of a small cafe on Pine Street, watching the Christmas lights reflect in the wet pavement like fallen stars. And for just a moment, she let herself remember what it felt like to believe in something permanent. But before we step deeper into this memory, tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe to follow the next journeys. She pulled her worn coat tighter around her shoulders and stepped back into the rain. 5 years. 5 years since she'd signed the divorce papers in a lawyer's office that smelled like old leather and regret. 5 years since Julian Pierce had looked at her across that table with eyes that had once held tenderness, but now held only the cold arithmetic of division. Assets, properties, the clean severance of two lives that had once been woven together. Back then, he'd been building something. An idea. A dream that consumed him in ways she couldn't compete with. She'd worked double shifts as an ER nurse to keep them afloat, while he poured everything into his tech startup. And she'd done it without resentment, because she believed in him. But belief, she'd learned, wasn't the same as being seen. The day he told her he needed to focus, that marriage was a distraction he couldn't afford. Something inside her had gone quiet. Not broken, just quiet. She'd signed the papers, took nothing but her grandmother's ring and a suitcase, disappeared into the parts of Seattle where men in $1,000 suits didn't venture. Now she lived in a studio apartment in Greenwood, worked at Harborview Medical Center, and spent her evenings volunteering at a shelter on 2nd Avenue. Her life had become small in the way that healed things often are, contained, purposeful, her own. She didn't follow the news, didn't read business magazines, didn't know that the man she'd once loved had become something else entirely. Julian Pierce was everywhere now, if you knew where to look. His face on the covers of Forbes and Wired. His company, Pierce Technologies, valued at over $2 billion. He'd built an empire on the bones of the dream she'd helped him keep alive, and he'd done it so thoroughly that he'd erased every trace of the struggling man he'd been. The man who used to fall asleep on their second-hand couch with his head in her lap. The man who used to kiss her forehead and promise her it would all be worth it. He'd kept the promise, just not with her in it. Clara pushed through the doors of Harborview, shaking rain from her dark hair. The hospital hummed with its usual chaos. The fluorescent brightness, the smell of antiseptic and coffee, the constant motion of people trying to hold other people together. She liked it here, liked the clarity of it. In the ER, things were simple. People were broken, and you tried to fix them. No one pretended. No one performed. She clocked in, tied her hair back, and let the rhythm of the shift pull her under. It was just past 7 when the call came through. Multi-vehicle accident on I-5. Multiple casualties. The ER braced itself. Clara moved through the preparations with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as she set up trays, checked monitors, cleared space. She'd learned a long time ago how to separate herself from the suffering, how to be present without being consumed. It was a skill she'd developed in her marriage, actually. The ability to love something and let it go at the same time. The ambulances arrived in waves. She worked through them one by one. A teenager with a fractured arm, an elderly woman in shock, a man with lacerations across his chest who kept asking about his dog. Then the last gurney came through. The paramedic was talking fast. Male, late 30s, head trauma, possible internal bleeding, passenger in a town car. Driver didn't make it. He's been in and out of consciousness. Clara moved to the side of the gurney, her hands already reaching for the IV line, her eyes scanning vitals. And then she looked down at his face. The world didn't stop. That's not how recognition works. The world kept moving. The monitors kept beeping. The other nurses kept shouting. The fluorescent lights kept humming. But something inside Clara went very, very still. Because the man on the gurney, bleeding and broken and fighting for breath, was Julian Pierce, and he had absolutely no idea who she was. His eyes opened briefly, unfocused and glassy with pain. They passed over her face without recognition, searching for something to anchor to, finding nothing. Then they closed again. "BP's dropping," someone called. Clara's hands moved automatically. This was what she'd been trained for: to separate the person from the body, to see only the wound that needed closing, the blood that needed replacing, the life that needed saving. She'd done it 1,000 times, but her fingers trembled as she adjusted the IV drip, and she hated herself for it. "Clara, I need you focused." Dr. Rahman's voice cut through the noise, sharp but not unkind. "I'm focused," she said, and meant it. She pushed everything else down into that quiet place inside her, and did her job. They worked for 40 minutes, stabilized him, stopped the bleeding. His head trauma was serious but manageable. A concussion, possible subdural hematoma that would need monitoring, 3 cracked ribs, lacerations. But he'd live. When they finally wheeled him up to the ICU, Clara stood at the scrub sink longer than necessary, washing her hands until the water ran cold. In the reflection of the metal paper towel dispenser, her face looked pale, strange, like someone she used to know. She didn't go home that night, picked up a double shift, let the work consume her the way it always did when she needed not to think. But every time she passed the ICU on the 4th floor, something pulled at her, a magnetic north she couldn't ignore. At 3 a.m, during a lull, she found herself standing outside his room. Through the window, she could see him sleeping, his face softer in unconsciousness. There was a bandage across his temple, an IV in his arm, the steady beep of the heart monitor. He looked vulnerable in a way she'd never seen him, even in their most intimate moments. Back then, he'd always been in motion, always building, always 3 steps ahead of the present moment. Now he was just a man, breathing, surviving. She shouldn't have gone in, but her feet carried her forward anyway. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of monitors and the distant city lights through the window. Rain traced patterns down the glass. She stood at the foot of his bed, her arms crossed over her scrubs, and let herself look at him. He'd changed. The softness in his face was gone, replaced by sharper angles, the kind that came from too much stress and too little sleep. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hair was shorter, more controlled. Even unconscious, he looked expensive. The kind of expensive that came from tailored suits and private trainers and penthouses with views of Elliott Bay. But his hands were the same. Long fingers, the scar across his right thumb from the time he'd tried to fix their kitchen cabinet and cut himself on a rusty nail. She'd bandaged it for him, and he'd kissed her to distract her from scolding him. She wondered if he even remembered that apartment, that version of himself. "You made it," she whispered to the sleeping man. "You got everything you wanted." His eyes opened. Clara froze. For a moment, they just looked at each other. His gaze was hazy, confused, searching her face with the slow processing of someone fighting through medication and pain. She waited for recognition to dawn, waited for her name to form on his lips, waited for the past to come rushing back. But he just blinked, slowly, and said, "Angel?" Her throat tightened. "You should rest," she managed. "Thought I died," he murmured, his words slurring slightly. "You look like someone I used to." He drifted off mid-sentence, his eyes closing again. Clara stood there for a long moment, her heart doing something painful in her chest. Then she adjusted his IV, checked his vitals with shaking hands, and walked out of the room. She made it to the staff bathroom before the tears came. just a few. Silent. She washed her face in the sink, stared at herself in the mirror, and made a decision. He didn't recognize her. That was good. That was clean. She would make sure his care was transferred to another nurse, file the necessary paperwork, and stay far away from the 4th floor. In a few days, he'd be discharged. He'd go back to his life, and she'd go back to hers. And this moment would fade into the background noise of all the other patients she'd saved and forgotten. It was the professional thing to do, the smart thing. But when she returned to the nurse's station and opened his chart, she saw the notation. No immediate family. Emergency contact. Executive assistant. No family. No one who loved him sitting vigil. Just an assistant who probably sent fruit baskets and made arrangements. Clara closed the chart and walked away. But she didn't transfer his care. The next morning, Clara arrived for her shift with a coffee she didn't drink, and a resolve that felt like armor. She'd convinced herself during the sleepless hours before dawn that this was simply about being a good nurse. Julian Pierce was a patient. She had a professional obligation. Nothing more. Dr. Rahman found her at the nurse's station. Your guy in 412 is awake, asking questions. Neurological signs are good, pupils responsive, no signs of brain swelling. We'll keep him another 48 hours for observation, but it looks like he got lucky. He's not my guy, Clara said too quickly. Dr. Rahman raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Clara waited until mid-morning to check on him, after she'd seen to 3 other patients and could pretend this was just routine. She knocked softly before entering, giving him time to refuse her. Come in, his voice called, stronger now. He was sitting up slightly, the bed angled to support him. Someone, probably his assistant, had already been there. There was a laptop on the rolling table, a phone charging on the windowsill, a leather messenger bag in the corner that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent. He'd tried to tame his hair, and despite the hospital gown and the bandage on his temple, he looked more like himself, more like the man who appeared on magazine covers. His eyes found hers, sharp and assessing now, the medication fog lifted. Good morning, Mr. Pierce, she said, keeping her voice professionally neutral. I'm Clara, one of the nurses on your care team. How are you feeling? Like I had an argument with the highway and lost, he said. There was a dryness to his tone, an attempt at humor that didn't quite land. He was studying her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Have we met before? Her heart stopped. Started again. I was part of the trauma team when you were brought in. No, I mean before that. Seattle's a small city, she said carefully, moving to check his vitals. You probably see a lot of faces. He didn't look convinced, but he let it drop. They told me someone saved my life, that the response time was the only reason I'm still here. The paramedics saved your life. We just stabilized you. The nurses downstairs said you were the one who wouldn't let me go under, that you kept me conscious, kept me talking. He paused. So thank you. Clara focused on the blood pressure cuff, pumping it with steady precision. Just doing my job. Still, thank you. She nodded, not trusting her voice. This close to him, she could smell the faint scent of expensive cologne beneath the hospital antiseptic. Could see the small details. The tiny scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall. The way his jaw tightened when he was uncomfortable. Things she'd once known by heart. Your BP's elevated, she said. You need to rest, not work. He glanced at the laptop. I have meetings. A board presentation on Thursday. You have a concussion and 3 cracked ribs. The meetings can wait. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that someone had spoken to him that way. You don't understand. The company... We'll survive without you for 48 hours, Clara interrupted, her tone sharper than she intended. "You're not invincible, Mr. Pierce. You almost died yesterday." The words hung between them. He looked at her for a long moment, and she wondered what he saw. A nurse doing her job. A stranger who didn't know enough to be impressed by him? Or something else? Something buried deep that his conscious mind couldn't access, but his body remembered. "You're right," he said finally. And there was something in his voice she recognized. A weariness. I'm not good at sitting still." "I remember," she said before she could stop herself. His eyes sharpened. "What?" "I imagine," she corrected quickly. "Most people in your position aren't." She finished checking his vitals, marked everything in his chart, and moved toward the door. "Clara." She stopped, her hand on the doorframe, but didn't turn around. "Will you be back to check on me?" There were a dozen professional reasons to say no. To assign him to another nurse. To maintain distance. But when she turned to look at him, she saw something in his face that undid her careful armor. He looked alone. Genuinely, profoundly alone in a way that money couldn't fix. "I'm on shift until 7, she heard herself say. "I'll check in." And she did. 3 more times that day. Each visit was brief, clinical, focused on vitals and medication and making sure he was following orders. But each time, he found a way to keep her there just a little longer. Asked her about the hospital, about Seattle, about whether the rain ever stopped. Small talk that felt like something else. By evening, when she came in for her final check, she found him standing at the window, one hand pressed to his ribs, looking out at the city lights emerging through the December dusk. "You're supposed to be resting," she said. "Couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts." He didn't turn around. "Do you know what it's like to build something from nothing? To pour everything you have into an idea, sacrifice everything, and then wake up one day and realize you're not sure why you're still doing it?" Clara's throat tightened. "No," she lied. "I was on my way to a gala last night. Another black tie event where everyone wants something from me. I was sitting in that car thinking about how much I didn't want to go. And then, nothing. Just impact. Glass. Pain. And when I woke up, you were there." He finally turned to look at her. "You saved my life, and I don't even know your last name." "Bennett," she said quietly. "Clara Bennett." He repeated it, like he was trying it on. Bennett. Something passed between them in the dim room. A recognition that neither of them could name. A pull that defied logic. "You should rest," she said, but her voice had lost its professional edge. "Will you come back tomorrow?" She should have said no. Should have requested reassignment right then. But instead, she nodded. And as she left his room, she realized the armor she'd carefully constructed had already begun to crack. The next 2 days passed in a rhythm that felt both dangerous and inevitable. Clara told herself she was simply being thorough, conscientious, ensuring her patient received the best care. But the truth lived in the small moments she couldn't rationalize away. The way she found reasons to check on him more frequently than necessary. The way conversations stretched beyond what was professional. The way she caught herself smoothing her hair before entering his room. Julian was a difficult patient in the way that driven people always are. He fought rest like an enemy, tried to work from his laptop until his headaches forced him to stop, made calls to his office that left him tense and irritable. But with Clara, something in him softened. He asked her questions. Real questions. What brought her to nursing? Whether she liked Seattle. What she did when she wasn't at the hospital. She answered carefully, editing out the parts that would give her away. Yes, she'd always lived in Seattle. No, she didn't have family here anymore. She liked the rain, actually. Found it comforting, She didn't mention the studio apartment in Greenwood that she'd moved to after the divorce. Didn't mention the shelter where she volunteered, helping people who'd lost everything rebuild their lives, because she understood what that felt like. Didn't mention the years she'd spent learning how to be whole again after he'd left. On the third morning, she arrived to find his room transformed. Someone had brought in fresh flowers, winter roses, pale and perfect. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria, was there with a rolling rack of suits and a tablet full of schedules. "The gala's been rescheduled for Saturday," Victoria was saying. "We've managed the press narrative around the accident. You're being positioned as resilient, undeterred, good optics. But you need to be there, Julian, the investors." "I'll be there," he said, his voice tight. Clara knocked on the open door. Both of them turned. Victoria's gaze swept over Clara with the cold efficiency of someone trained to assess and dismiss. "I'll come back," Clara said. "No, please." Julian's voice stopped her. Victoria was just leaving. Victoria's smile was thin and professional. "Of course, I'll have the car ready Saturday evening." She gathered her things, paused at the door. "Try to rest, Julian. You're no good to anyone if you collapse again." When she was gone, the room felt larger, emptier. Clara moved to check the monitors, but Julian spoke before she could settle into the familiar routine. "Do you ever feel trapped by your own life?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." He exhaled slowly, wincing at the pull on his ribs. "I built something big, and now it owns me more than I own it. Every decision affects thousands of people. Every public appearance is calculated. Every relationship is transactional." He looked at her. "Except this one." Clara's hand stilled on the blood pressure cuff. "I'm your nurse, Mr. Pierce. This is literally a transaction." "Julian," he corrected. "And no, it's not. You're the first person in years who's looked at me and not seen dollar signs or opportunities. You tell me to rest. You argue with me. You treat me like I'm just a person." "You are just a person," Clara said quietly. "That's all any of us are." He studied her for a long moment. "Who hurt you?" The question landed like a physical blow. "Excuse me?" "I can see it. The way you keep everyone at arm's length. The way you're kind but never soft. Someone taught you not to trust." Clara's jaw tightened. This was too close. Too perceptive. "We're not talking about me." "Why not? I've told you about myself." "No. You've told me about your company, your obligations, not about yourself." The words came out sharper than she intended. "There's a difference." Silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. "You're right," Julian said finally. "I don't know how to talk about myself anymore. I think I forgot who that person even is." He leaned back against the pillows, suddenly looking exhausted. "But when you're here, I remember something. Like there's a version of me that still exists somewhere, buried under all the rest." Clara felt the walls she'd built threatening to crumble. This was exactly what she'd feared. Not his recognition, his connection. The way he was reaching for something real, without knowing he'd already had it and thrown it away. "You should rest," she said, retreating into professionalism like a shelter. "Dr. Rahman will be in this afternoon to discuss your discharge." "Clara, I have other patients, Mr. Pierce." She left before he could say anything else, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall and pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself back to steadiness. "You okay?" Another nurse, Maria, touched her shoulder. "Fine, just tired." But she wasn't fine, because somewhere in the last 3 days, the past had stopped being past. It had become present, alive, unresolved. That evening, after her shift, Clara stood in the hospital parking garage, rain drumming on the concrete above her. She'd made a decision. Tomorrow, when Julian was discharged, she would end this. She would maintain professional boundaries, ensure his care was transferred properly, and let him walk back into his life while she stayed in hers. It was the only way to protect herself. Her phone buzzed. A message from the nurse's station. Patient in 412 requesting you. Says it's urgent. Clara closed her eyes, took a breath, then walked back inside. She found Julian standing by the window again, this time holding something in his hands. When he turned, she saw it was a photograph. "Victoria brought my things from the car," he said. "This was in my wallet." He held it out to her. It was old, bent at the corners, faded from years of being carried. A photograph of two people, a younger Julian, softer around the edges, smiling like he meant it. And beside him, her arms around his waist, her face bright with uncomplicated joy, was Clara, from their wedding day, 7 years ago. The world tilted. "I've been carrying this for years," Julian said, his voice strange and distant. "And I couldn't remember who you were, just that you mattered, that I'd lost something important." He looked up at her, and there was something broken in his eyes. "But it's you. It's been you this whole time." Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't move. "Julian, why didn't you tell me?" The question wasn't angry. It was devastated. "I didn't recognize my own wife, and you just let me talk to you like a stranger." "Ex-wife," she whispered. "We've been divorced for 5 years." The words landed between them like stones. The rain intensified outside, throwing shadows across the hospital room. Clara watched them move across Julian's face, darkness and light, alternating, relentless. He was still holding the photograph, his thumb tracing the edge like he could touch the past if he tried hard enough. 5 years, he repeated, the words hollow. "And I didn't even—" "You were building your empire," Clara said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You were focused. That's what you told me you needed to be. Undistracted." "I said that?" He looked at her like he was seeing a stranger in the mirror. "I told you that you were a distraction?" "You said marriage was a distraction. That you needed to concentrate on the company. That we could revisit everything once you'd secured the Series B funding." She crossed her arms, a barrier between them. "The funding came through 3 weeks later. I waited for you to revisit. You sent divorce papers instead." Julian sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, the photograph still clutched in his hand. "My God. Your assistant drafted them. Very thorough, very clean. You didn't ask for anything back. You'd already taken everything that mattered." Clara's voice cracked, just slightly. "I signed them in a Starbucks on Capitol Hill because I couldn't afford a lawyer, and I didn't want to fight you. You'd already made your choice so clear." "Clara, I don't—" He looked up at her, and there was genuine anguish in his eyes. "I don't remember being that person. You don't remember a lot of things." She moved to the window, unable to look at him anymore. "You don't remember the apartment in Fremont where the heat never worked. You don't remember how I worked 60-hour weeks at the hospital so you could focus on your startup. You don't remember the nights you'd fall asleep at your desk and I'd cover you with a blanket and leave coffee for you in the morning." Her reflection in the glass looked ghostly, insubstantial. "You don't remember telling me you loved me while asking me to let you go." The silence stretched so long she thought he might not respond. Then she heard him stand, heard his footsteps, careful and pained from his injuries, crossing the room toward her. "I remember," he said quietly, and his voice was different now, raw, unguarded. remember the coffee. I remember waking up with your blanket around my shoulders and thinking I didn't deserve you. I remember... He stopped, and she could hear him struggling. I remember being so afraid of failing that I couldn't see anything else. Not even you. Especially not you. Clara turned to face him. He was closer than she expected, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carved into his features, the regret that had found a home in the lines around his mouth. I was drowning, Julian continued. The company was everything I'd staked my entire identity on. If it failed, I failed. And you were so good, Clara. So steady and strong and certain. You had your calling, your purpose. You were saving lives every day while I was chasing something that might never exist. He looked down at the photograph still in his hand. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me, that I was holding you back, that if I just got the company stable, just got to the next milestone, I could come back to you as someone worthy. I never asked you to be worthy, Clara said, and the tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. I asked you to be present, to see me, to let me stand beside you instead of behind you. I know that now. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her face, his thumb catching a tear. But by the time I realized what I'd done, you were gone. I looked for you. For months I looked. But you disappeared so completely. I didn't disappear. I just stopped existing in your world. She didn't pull away from his touch, even though she knew she should. I moved to the parts of Seattle where men like you don't go. I rebuilt my life without the weight of your ambition crushing it. I learned how to be enough for myself. You were always enough, Julian said fiercely. I was the one who was broken, who couldn't see that everything I was chasing was meaningless without you. Don't. Clara stepped back, and his hand fell away. Don't rewrite history now because you feel guilty. You made your choice, Julian. You chose the company. You chose the empire. You got exactly what you wanted. I got exactly what I deserved, he corrected, his voice breaking. A fortune I don't enjoy. A life with no one in it who actually knows me. Success that tastes like ashes. He looked at her with eyes that held an ocean of regret. Do you know what I was thinking in that car right before the accident? I was thinking about ending it all. Not the company, the whole performance. I was thinking about walking away from everything and trying to find the person I used to be. The confession hit Clara like a physical force. Julian, and then I woke up and you were there, my angel, the person I'd been carrying in my wallet for 5 years without even knowing why. He moved closer again, and this time she let him. Maybe I didn't recognize your face, but something in me knew, something remembered. Clara's chest tightened. That doesn't change anything, doesn't it? He was close enough now that she could feel the warmth of him, could smell the scent beneath the hospital antiseptic that was uniquely his. You could have transferred my care, could have stayed away, but you didn't. Why? Because I'm a good nurse. Clara. Her name on his lips was a prayer. Why? She closed her eyes, the truth forcing its way up through years of carefully constructed armor. Because seeing you broken was easier than seeing you whole and untouchable. Because for 3 days, I got to take care of you the way I used to, before you decided you didn't need me anymore. Because I'm an idiot who never learned how to stop. She didn't finish the sentence. Couldn't. Because Julian pulled her into his arms, carefully, mindful of his broken ribs, and held her the way he used to, like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. And Clara, who had promised herself she'd never let him close again, who had built a life specifically designed to keep this moment from happening, broke. She cried into his chest while he stroked her hair with shaking hands. Cried for the girl who'd believed in forever. Cried for the years of silence and separation. Cried for the version of him she'd lost, and the version of herself she'd had to become. "I'm sorry," Julian whispered against her hair. "I'm so sorry, Clara. For all of it. For being blind and stupid and cowardly. For choosing ambition over love. For not fighting to find you. For carrying your picture but forgetting your face." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his own eyes wet. "But I'm not sorry for this. For finding you again, even if it took almost dying to do it. Julian, we can't... I know there's too much damage, too many years, too much I can never take back." He touched her face again, gentle, reverent. "But please don't ask me to pretend you're just my nurse. Don't ask me to let you disappear again without fighting for what I should have fought for the first time." Clara looked up at him, at the man who had broken her heart, and somehow, impossibly, still held all the pieces. And she knew she was standing at a cliff edge, knew that stepping forward would mean risking everything she'd carefully rebuilt. But she also knew that some part of her had been waiting for this moment since the day she'd signed those papers in a Starbucks 5 years ago. "One chance," she whispered. "You get one chance, Julian. Not to fix the past, but to prove you've learned from it." He nodded, something fierce and grateful blazing in his eyes. "One chance. That's all I'm asking." And when he kissed her, carefully, tentatively, like he was afraid she might vanish, it tasted like rain and regret and the terrifying possibility of hope. Julian was discharged the next morning with strict orders for rest and follow-up appointments. Clara kept everything professional during the paperwork. Vitals checked, medications explained, discharge instructions delivered in her capable nurse voice. But when he asked for her number, she found herself writing it on the back of his prescription slip, her handwriting small and careful, like she was signing a contract she wasn't sure she could honor. "I meant what I said," he told her, as an orderly arrived with a wheelchair. "Hospital policy, even for billionaires. One chance. I won't waste it." Victoria appeared then, efficient and immaculate, already on her phone coordinating his departure. A town car idled at the entrance. Not the same one from the accident, but identical in its dark, expensive anonymity. Clara watched from the nurse's station window as Julian was helped inside, watched the car pull away into Seattle's gray morning, and wondered if she'd just made the worst decision of her life. Her phone buzzed that evening while she was heating soup in her tiny kitchen. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for saving my life. All of it. Not just the part in the ER. Jay." She stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Rest. Doctor's orders." His reply came immediately. "Have dinner with me tomorrow." Clara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was the moment to establish boundaries, to keep things slow and measured and safe. But something reckless had woken up inside her during that kiss in the hospital room. Something that had been sleeping for 5 years. "Where?" "Anywhere you want. Your world this time, not mine." She gave him the address of a small Italian place in Greenwood, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. The kind of place the old Julian would have loved, before he'd learned to prefer restaurants where the menu had no prices. He arrived exactly on time, dressed down in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than her rent, but looked almost normal. There was still a small bandage at his temple, a reminder of how fragile everything was. When he smiled at her across the table, she saw both versions of him simultaneously. The boy she'd married and the man he'd become. They talked carefully at first, orbiting around the dangerous topics. He asked about her work at the hospital, and she told him about the shelter, about finding purpose in helping people rebuild. He told her about the company, but differently now. Not with pride, but with weariness, admitting how hollow it felt to build something so big with no one to share it with. "I have 7,000 employees," he said, twirling pasta on his fork. And I couldn't tell you the name of a single person who'd visit me in the hospital if something happened. Victoria would send flowers. The board would send a memo. But no one would just sit with me. That's the life you chose, Clara said gently. I know, and I'm going to change it. He set down his fork, his expression serious. I've been thinking about what you said, about being present. I can't undo the last 5 years, but I can choose differently going forward. It's not that simple, Julian. You have responsibilities. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. The words came out firm, decided. Promoting my COO to CEO. I'll stay on the board, maintain vision oversight, but I'm done sacrificing everything for the company. It cost me too much the first time. Clara's breath caught. You can't make that decision because of me, because of guilt. I'm not. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. I'm making it because almost dying gave me clarity. Life is short, Clara, and I've spent the last 5 years chasing more money, more success, more validation, and none of it meant anything. His grip tightened. You were right to disappear, right to build a life that actually mattered. I want the chance to build something that matters too. With you, if you'll let me. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately it frightened her. But there was still a wall inside her, built from all the nights she'd waited for him to come home, all the conversations they'd never had, all the ways he'd chosen everything else over her. I need time, she said. I need to see if this is real or just guilt and nostalgia. Take all the time you need. He smiled, sad and hopeful. I'm not going anywhere. But 3 days later, reality arrived in the form of Victoria at Clara's apartment door. The assistant stood in the hallway looking severely out of place, her designer coat and leather portfolio jarring against the building's worn carpet and flickering hallway light. Ms. Bennett, may I come in? Clara's instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won. She stepped aside. Victoria's gaze swept the small studio with barely concealed assessment. The second-hand furniture, the small kitchen, the life lived in careful economy. I'll be direct. Julian Pierce is about to make the biggest mistake of his professional life, and you need to stop him. Clara crossed her arms. I don't know what you're talking about. He's stepping down as CEO, giving up operational control of a company valued at over $2 billion. For what? A second chance with his ex-wife who works for $18 an hour? Victoria's voice was sharp, but not cruel, just brutally pragmatic. Do you have any idea what's at stake? The jobs, the innovation, the investors who believed in his vision. That's his decision to make. Is it? Or did you manipulate a man in a vulnerable moment? He almost died, Ms. Bennett. He's not thinking clearly. The accusation landed like a slap. I told him not to make any decisions because of me. And yet he's making them anyway. Victoria pulled a folder from her portfolio. Pierce Technologies is in the middle of a critical acquisition. If Julian steps back now, the deal collapses. 3,000 jobs disappear. Millions in shareholder value evaporates. She set the folder on Clara's small table. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to wait. 6 months. Let him close this deal, stabilize the transition, do it right. Then, if this is real, it will still be real. Clara stared at the folder, not touching it. Why do you care? You're his assistant, not his mother. Because I've worked for Julian Pierce for 4 years, and I've never seen him like this. Distracted, impulsive, making decisions with his heart instead of his head. Victoria's expression softened slightly. I actually hope you're real. Hope this isn't just trauma bonding or guilt. But if it is, better to find out before he destroys everything he's built. After Victoria left, Clara sat in her apartment staring at the folder. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. The words had already done their damage. Manipulated. Vulnerable. Impulsive. She thought about Julian at dinner, the certainty in his voice when he talked about stepping back. Had she influenced that? Had she, even unconsciously, let him believe that choosing her meant abandoning his company? Her phone buzzed. Julian. Thinking about you. Coffee tomorrow morning before your shift? Clara stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She thought about the old Julian, the one who'd poured everything into his dream while she'd supported him. She thought about the new Julian, ready to abandon that dream for her. And she realized neither version was complete. Neither version was the man he could be if he learned to balance both parts of himself. She made a decision. The next morning, she met him at the coffee shop near the hospital. He was already there, 2 cups waiting, his face lighting up when he saw her. And it hurt, physically hurt to see that joy and know what she was about to do. Julian, we need to talk. The light dimmed. That's never good. She sat down, wrapped her hands around the coffee for warmth. Victoria came to see me. His expression hardened. I'm going to fire her. Don't. She was right. Clara took a breath. You can't step down right now. Not like this. Not in the middle of a major deal that affects thousands of people. Clara, listen to me. 5 years ago, I supported your dream even when it cost me everything. I won't be the reason you abandon it now. She reached across the table, took his hand. I don't want you to choose between me and your company. I want you to figure out how to have both. How to be successful without being consumed. How to build something meaningful without sacrificing everyone who loves you. I can do both, he insisted. I can step back and still... Not yet. Not right now. In the aftermath of trauma, making decisions to prove something to me. She squeezed his hand. Do it right, Julian. Close your deal. Set up the proper transition. Show me you can change the way you work without running away from what you've built. Her voice cracked. Show me you've learned balance, not just substituted one obsession for another. He stared at her for a long moment, and she watched him process it, the wisdom in her words warring with his desperate need to prove himself different. How long? He asked finally. As long as it takes for you to do it right. 3 months, 6, however long the deal needs. And us. We take it slow. We learn each other again. We figure out if this is real or just the echo of what we used to have. She lifted his hand to her lips, kissed his knuckles gently. And if it's real, Julian, it'll survive the wait. He closed his eyes, and she saw him struggling, saw the old impulse to fight, to insist, to push forward regardless of wisdom. But then he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll do it right. But Clara... He opened his eyes, and they were blazing with determination. I'm not making the same mistake twice. I'm going to prove to you that I can have both. That I can be the man you deserved 5 years ago. She smiled through the tears that had started to fall. Then prove it. 6 months later, Clara stood at the window of her apartment, watching Christmas lights blink across Greenwood's modest skyline. The same rain that had fallen the night Julian came back into her life was falling now, soft and persistent, turning the world into watercolor once again. But this time, she wasn't remembering what permanence felt like. She was living it. Her phone rested on the windowsill, the screen dark. Julian had texted an hour ago. Deal closed. Board transition complete. Coming to you now. She'd responded with a simple heart emoji, something she never would have done 6 months ago, when her armor was still intact and her walls were still high. But piece by piece, week by week, He'd dismantled her defenses not with grand gestures, but with consistent presence. He'd called her every morning before her shift, showed up at the hospital cafeteria with coffee during her breaks, never staying long, never demanding more time than she could give. He'd attended therapy, alone first, then eventually asking if she'd come to sessions with him. They'd sat in a counselor's office in Fremont and excavated the wreckage of their first marriage, pulling truth from the ruins. He'd wept when he finally understood the depth of what his ambition had cost them both. She'd wept when she admitted she'd been so afraid of losing herself again that she'd almost refused to let him try. The acquisition had been brutal. 18-hour days, intense negotiations, moments when she could see the old obsession threatening to consume him. But he'd done something different this time. He'd set boundaries, left the office at 7 when he said he would, turned off his phone during their Friday dinners, showed up exhausted but present, choosing her even when the choosing was hard. And slowly, carefully, she'd let herself hope. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, Julian stood in the hallway, soaked from the rain, still in his suit from the board meeting. But his face was different than it had been 6 months ago. Lighter, free of something heavy he'd been carrying. "It's done," he said simply. She pulled him inside, helped him out of his wet coat. "Tell me." They sat on her small couch, the one she'd bought at a thrift store 5 years ago, and he told her everything. How he'd negotiated terms that protected every employee. How he'd set up a leadership structure that didn't require his constant presence. How he'd proven to the board that stepping back from day-to-day operations didn't mean abandoning his vision, just trusting others to carry it forward. "And?" Clara prompted, seeing there was more. "And I bought something." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a set of keys. "It's not big. Nothing like the penthouse. Just a house in Ballard with a garden and enough rooms that we could each have space to work. There's a study where you could set up if you wanted to go back to school. I know you talked about getting your nurse practitioner license. And there's a kitchen that actually gets morning light." Clara took the keys, her hands trembling slightly. "Julian, I'm not asking you to move in," he said quickly. "I'm just saying it's there. Whenever you're ready. If you're ready." He took her hands, keys and all, and held them between his own. "I know I have to earn this, earn you. Every day for the rest of my life if you'll let me. But I want you to know I'm serious. About building a life that has room for both of us. About being the partner you deserved the first time." She looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd almost died and found himself in the wreckage. The man who'd spent 6 months proving that change wasn't just possible, but sustainable. The man who'd learned that love wasn't a distraction from success, but the entire point of it. "I'm ready," she said. His eyes widened. "Ready? To try, to see if we can build something better than what we had before." She smiled, and it felt like sunrise. "But Julian, I'm keeping this apartment, for a while at least, as a reminder that I can stand on my own if I need to." "Fair," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than fair. And we're doing this differently. No sacrificing ourselves for each other. No pedestals or martyrdom. Just two people trying to build something honest." "Yes. God, yes." He pulled her close, careful still, as if afraid she might vanish. "I love you, Clara. I never stopped, even when I forgot how to say it. Even when I forgot your face, some part of me kept carrying you, kept searching." "I know," she whispered against his chest. "I kept you too, in the quiet places, in the parts of me I wouldn't let anyone else touch. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other while rain drummed against the windows and the city hummed around them. There would be challenges ahead, Negotiations about time and space and boundaries, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface, conversations that would require courage and honesty, but they'd face them together this time, with eyes open and armor down. Eventually, Julian pulled back just enough to look at her face. "Will you come see the house? Just to look?" Clara laughed. "Now? It's almost midnight." "I've waited 6 months. Can't wait another day to show you." He stood, pulled her to her feet. "Please." So they drove through rain-soaked Seattle in his car, more modest than she expected, a hybrid instead of the luxury sedan Victoria would have chosen. He played music she remembered from their first life together, old indie songs about hope and heartbreak. And when they pulled up to a craftsman bungalow in Ballard with a porch light glowing gold against the darkness, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years, the sense that she was coming home. Inside, the house was empty, but full of possibility. Hardwood floors that needed refinishing, windows that framed views of the neighborhood, a kitchen with the promised morning light, even though it was dark now. Julian walked her through each room, pointing out potential, where a reading chair might go, where they could put bookshelves, where the garden could expand in spring. But it was the small details that undid her. The way he'd already installed grab bars in the bathroom because he knew her shift work left her exhausted. The fact that he'd chosen a house on her bus line to the hospital. The bedroom on the first floor that he said could be hers if she wanted her own space. He'd thought about her needs, her comfort, her independence. In the empty living room, with rain streaming down the windows and the distant sound of the city breathing around them, Julian turned to face her. "I know we're taking this slow. I know we're being careful. But Clara, I need you to know something." He took both her hands. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that you're chosen. Not just today, not just when it's easy, but every day. In the small moments and the hard ones. When work is demanding and life is complicated, and the shine of this second chance has worn into ordinary days." His voice broke. "You were always enough. You were always everything. I just had to almost lose everything to remember what everything meant." Clara's tears came quietly, the way rain comes to Seattle. Inevitable, cleansing, soft. "Ask me again in 6 months if I want to move in. Ask me to marry you again when we've survived a year of real life together." "But Julian..." She touched his face, traced the scar at his temple that would always remind them both how fragile life was. "I choose you too. The broken version and the healing one. The ambitious CEO and the man who carries my picture in his wallet. All of it." When he kissed her this time, it wasn't tentative or careful. It was a promise. A beginning. A choice they were both making with open eyes and scarred hearts, and the hard-won wisdom that love wasn't about perfection, but about showing up, again and again, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. They stayed in the empty house until dawn, talking about everything and nothing, making plans and unmaking them, learning the rhythm of each other again. When the sun finally broke through Seattle's perpetual clouds, sending pale gold light through the kitchen windows, Clara stood in that promised morning brightness and thought about how far she'd traveled. From the girl who'd signed divorce papers in a Starbucks to the woman who'd saved her ex-husband's life. From the nurse who'd learned to need no one to the partner who was learning to need someone again. But differently this time, with boundaries and honesty and the understanding that needing someone wasn't the same as losing yourself. Julian came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" "That rain saved us both," she said. "The night you almost died and I found you again. The rain that's always falling in this city. It's like Seattle knew we needed washing clean, needed to start over." "Then here's to rain," Julian murmured. "And second chances, and stubborn nurses who refused to give up on broken men. And reformed CEOs who finally learned what matters, Clara added, turning in his arms to face him. Outside, the December morning was cold and gray and absolutely ordinary. But inside the empty house that was full of possibility, two people who'd lost each other and found their way back were building something new from the ashes of what they'd been. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be setbacks and struggles, moments of doubt and fear. But they would face them together, with open communication and hard-won wisdom and the fierce determination of people who'd already survived losing each other once. And in the end, that would be enough. More than enough. Everything. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new. They're about finding yourself first, then rediscovering what you lost when you were too afraid to hold on. Love isn't just about passion or promises. It's about choosing each other, every day, in the small moments and the hard ones. It's about learning that sometimes you have to let go completely before you can hold on the right way.